Never mistake God's silence for his absence. Sometimes he's just preparing a miracle for the very last minute. Mai had never believed that saying until her world fell apart. At 35, she had always been strong, hard-working, and confident that effort alone could fix everything. But life had a way of proving her wrong. The company she worked for suddenly went bankrupt, and months of unemployment followed. Her savings disappeared, her husband grew distant, and the walls of their home seemed to close in tighter every night. She had prayed, oh, how she had prayed, but nothing seemed to change. If God truly hears me, why isn't he answering? She whispered countless times in the dark. Some nights she stared at the ceiling, tears soaking her pillow, whispering, "Lord, if you're still there, please give me a sign." But every morning looked the same: no job, no hope, and her heart growing colder each day. Then, one evening, while packing her things to leave the small apartment she could no longer afford, she found an old notebook in a drawer of her forgotten prayer journal. On the very first page were the words, "I will not be afraid, for you are the one who makes a way when there is none." Her heart tightened as she read line after line, simple, childlike prayers written years ago. There was so much faith in those words, faith she no longer had. But as she read, something stirred deep inside. Maybe God wasn't gone. Maybe she had just stopped looking for him. That night, she knelt to pray again, not to beg for money or success, but to surrender. "Lord," she whispered, "if you want me to walk this path, show me the way. If you have a plan, give me the courage to trust it." When she opened her eyes, she felt something she hadn't known in months. Peace. Not because her problems had vanished, but because she realized she wasn't walking alone anymore. The next morning, her phone rang. It was an old friend who worked at a small charity center. "We're looking for someone to coordinate a new outreach project," her friend said. "It doesn't pay much, but it could be a fresh start." Mai said yes without hesitation. She didn't understand why, but something inside her whispered that this was more than coincidence. It was a door one only God could open. And in that moment, she finally understood. Unanswered prayers don't mean forgotten prayers. Sometimes, God waits not to punish us, but to prepare us. He is the God of the last minute, never late, always right on time. So, if you're standing in the middle of your own storm, thinking he has forgotten you, remember this: God is still working behind the scenes. He hasn't abandoned you. Your breakthrough might not come when you expect it, but it will come, in his perfect timing. And when it does, you look back and see how every closed door was leading you straight to the one he meant for you all along. If this story touches you, share your own experience in the comments below. Your testimony might be the very light someone else needs to find faith again. On her first morning at the charity center, Mai felt both nervous and unsure. The small house tucked deep in a narrow alley didn't look like much. No signboard, no fancy office, just a few wooden tables and the warm smiles of people cleaning up. A middle-aged woman walked over, grasped Mai's hands, and said gently, "Welcome, dear. Everyone here works out of love." Those simple words pierced through the heaviness in her heart. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such genuine kindness. At first, her days were tiring. She helped distribute food to the homeless and to orphan children. The work was demanding: early mornings, long walks, little pay. Yet strangely, Mai didn't feel weary. Instead, a quiet joy began to grow inside her. Each time she saw a child's bright smile over a warm meal, or the grateful eyes of an elderly man receiving bread, she felt as if God himself was smiling through them. One rainy afternoon, as she held an umbrella over an old woman's head, the woman whispered, "Bless you, child. God sent you here at the perfect time." Those words stopped Mai in her tracks. For the first time in months, she truly felt God's presence, not as a distant hope, but as a living force working through her hands. In the weeks that followed, more people came to volunteer at the center. Some heard about it online, some through friends, and others just happened to walk by. It seemed that every time I felt tired or uncertain, something good would happen, like a quiet reminder from heaven. Don't give up. You're right where I need you to be. Then, one morning, the director called her into his small office. He said, "We'd like you to lead a new project, a scholarship program for orphans. We believe you're the one God has chosen for this task." Mai was stunned. She, the woman who once lost everything, was now being trusted to help shape lives. Tears filled her eyes. That night, she sat before a small wooden cross in her room, reflecting on how far she had come. Every moment of despair, every tear, every delay, it had all been leading her here. What once looked like dead ends had been divine detours. If you've ever felt lost like Mai, if you've ever wondered whether God still hears you, take a moment right now and press like as a sign of your faith that He is still working. And if you've ever witnessed His hand move at the very last moment, share your story in the comments. Your words might be the spark of hope that someone else desperately needs tonight. Mai realized that miracles don't always begin with thunder or light. Sometimes they begin quietly when a weary soul chooses to trust again. She learned that faith doesn't wait for the mountain to move. It climbs anyway, trusting that God will make a way at the top. The next morning, she stood outside the center, watching sunlight filter through the trees. Peace settled over her heart like a gentle promise. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she was sure of one thing: God was still leading the way, one step at a time. The following days grew busier than ever. The scholarship project for orphans that Mai had been assigned to lead required careful planning, constant communication, and most of all, patience and love. At first, she doubted herself. Could she really handle such responsibility? But each time fear crept in, she remembered her prayer: "Lord, if you want me to walk, please lead me." And somehow, every time she was about to give up, God sent a quiet sign to keep her going. Sometimes it was a sudden email from a donor offering to help. Sometimes it was a heartfelt conversation with a volunteer whose faith rekindled her own, and sometimes it was nothing more than a gentle breeze drifting through the window during long nights of work, a whisper from heaven reminding her that she wasn't alone. One afternoon, Mai met Lynn, a 10-year-old girl with bright, tender eyes. Lynn had lost her parents in an accident and lived with her frail grandmother. Despite everything, she always smiled and said, "I believe God will take care of us." Those simple words struck deep within Mai's heart. She realized that faith doesn't always come from those who understand life best. Sometimes it shines brightest in the pure heart of a child. From that day on, Mai spent more time with Lynn. She helped her study, shared Bible stories, and prayed with her each evening. Over time, something miraculous began to happen. It wasn't Mai helping Lynn grow stronger. It was Lynn helping Mai rediscover her own faith. When Mai looked into the child's innocent eyes, she saw herself years ago, the woman who once believed wholeheartedly that God would always do something good, even when nothing made sense. The project soon flourished beyond expectation. More sponsors reached out, more children returned to school, and the small charity center filled with laughter and hope. Many nights, Mai would stand quietly in the courtyard, watching the children play, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She knew this was not her doing. This was God's work, flowing through her hands, touching lives far beyond what she could see. One evening, the director approached her with a smile. "Mai," he said, "I knew God chose the right person. You haven't just built a program. You've brought life back into this place." The words brought tears to her eyes. She couldn't even reply. Her heart was too full. That night, she opened her old prayer journal, the same one she had rediscovered in her darkest moment. Turning to a blank page, she began to write with trembling hands. "Lord, I once begged you to save me from the pit, and you did more than that. You lifted me out, and then you used me to lift others, too." She paused, smiled, and let the tears fall freely. Perhaps that was the true meaning of faith. Not just to survive the storm, but to become a light for others still caught in it. When God opens a way for us, He also invites us to open the way for someone else. Under the soft glow of her desk lamp, Mai closed the journal and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Now I understand." Life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. The charity center was thriving. The children were learning, and laughter filled the small courtyard each morning. Mai felt grateful. Every smile reminded her of God's grace. But just when everything seemed stable, another storm quietly formed on the horizon. One crisp autumn morning, as she arrived at the center, an urgent message awaited her. The main sponsor of their scholarship program had suddenly withdrawn. The budget they had carefully planned was now only enough for 2 more months. Fear and confusion rippled through the staff. The project that had brought hope to so many children now stood on the brink of collapse. That night, Mai sat in her small room, holding the financial papers in trembling hands. "Lord," she whispered through tears, "I thought this was your plan. I've trusted you every step of the way. Please, show me what to do." But the night remained silent. No miracle, no sign, only the soft whisper of wind through the window. It was the same stillness she remembered from her darkest days. For the first time in months, doubt began to creep in again. Yet the next morning, she forced herself to smile as she greeted the children. Among them, little Lin ran up and hugged her tightly. "Miss Mai, I pray every night that God will help you," the girl said with innocent confidence. "He will do something. I just know it." Those simple words pierced through Mai's fear like sunlight breaking the clouds. She realized, hadn't she been the one teaching these children that God always has a plan, even when we can't see it? With renewed determination, she decided not to give up. She began writing letters to other organizations, explaining their mission and the stories of the children they served. Before sending each email, she prayed over it, asking God to guide every word. Days passed, then weeks, still no reply. The uncertainty was unbearable. But on the very last night of the month, just as Mai was about to shut down her computer and pray one more time, a soft chime echoed. "No email received." It was from a small international foundation. They had somehow come across an old post about the center and were deeply moved. They wanted to meet to discuss long-term support. Mai froze, tears spilling down her cheeks, not out of surprise but out of recognition. Once again, God had shown up at the last moment. The God of the final hour had answered, just in time. The meeting went better than she could have dreamed. The foundation not only agreed to cover all remaining expenses but also committed to funding the project. For the next 3 years, the entire team rejoiced. Laughter and gratitude filled the air. Mai stood quietly, looking up at the sky, whispering, "Lord, you came again right on time." That night, she wrote in her journal, "Faith doesn't remove storms. It gives me the strength to stand within them. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing God teaches me isn't how to escape the waves, but how to trust Him while they rage." She understood now this wasn't a punishment, but preparation. God wasn't breaking her faith. He was deepening it. She was no longer the woman begging God to rescue her, but the one walking hand in hand with Him through every season. As the moonlight streamed through her window, Mai smiled softly. The path ahead was still uncertain, but her heart was steady, because she had seen, again and again, that the Lord always arrives right when we need Him most. Time passed, and the storms of Mai's life began to fade into calm. The small charity center she once built in tears had now become a warm home for dozens of children. Their laughter, their morning prayers, and their innocent songs filled the air with a joy that could only come from heaven. Some nights, Mai would sit alone by the window, looking back on her journey with a heart full of gratitude. She remembered those moments when everything seemed lost, when her strength was gone, and all she could do was whisper prayers into the silence. And yet, it was in those last moments that God had always shown up, not with thunder or lightning, but with quiet, perfect timing that changed everything. She finally understood. No prayer ever goes unheard. Even when God seems silent, He is still working, preparing something greater than we can imagine. Sometimes, His delay isn't denial. It's a lesson in trust. True faith is not about seeing miracles, it's about believing even when nothing seems to happen. One evening, Mai was invited to speak at a small church gathering. As she stood before the crowd, many of whom had walked through the same struggles, she once knew her voice trembled, but her words carried power. "There were moments I thought God was silent," she said softly, "but I've learned that His silence is not absence. It's preparation. God never comes early, and He never comes late. He comes right on time in those final moments when you realize that only He can make a way." The room fell quiet. Tears streamed down faces as people bowed their heads, some praying silently, others simply reflecting. They weren't just listening to my story, they were seeing their own. The story of every believer who had cried out in desperation and discovered that God was closer than they thought. That night, back at the center, Mai opened her old journal, the one filled with her early prayers and fears. She smiled as she read a faded line, "Lord, if you still hear me, please give me a sign." She picked up her pen and wrote underneath, "I've seen it, Lord." Not just a sign, but an entire journey. From that day on, whenever someone came to her burdened with worrying, she would say gently, "Don't be afraid. If you're standing at your last moment, you're also standing at the edge of God's miracle. He always has a way, even when we can't see it yet." Mai knew her journey wasn't over. New challenges would come, but now, her heart was steady, her faith unshakable. She had learned to see every storm not as punishment, but as an invitation to walk closer with God. Each night, her prayer was simple. "Lord, thank you for the last moments of my life, when I thought I was falling, but you lifted me up. Help me remember that no matter what happens, you are always making a way." Outside her window, the street lights glowed against raindrops that sparkled like tiny jewels. Mai closed her eyes and smiled. In her heart, she knew every tear sown in faith becomes the seed of a future miracle. And to you, dear listener, if you're standing in your own last moments, don't give up. Keep praying, keep trusting. The same God who answered Mai will answer you too. His timing is perfect, and His love never fails. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to this channel so that together we can continue spreading faith, hope, and the miracles of God's love. Because perhaps the next video might be the message He wants you to hear today.